Hey, this is Travis Gafford, the Doublelift expert, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Doublelift, the former star AD carry of CLG, Counter Logic Gaming, joining TSM, Team Solo Mid, has to be one of the most shocking transfers in the history of League of Legends. Probably the most shocking in some ways. Not because the situation doesn't make sense to some degree, and that it doesn't make sense as a destination he'd go to if he did leave one team or another, but just the fact of that, when I first saw this news, part of me legitimately tried to think, it can't be April 1st, because obviously when we are in the year, is there another way it could be a joke or some kind of marketing campaign? And then I thought, the backlash should be so big if you tried to do that. And obviously it's a real thing. It really happened. Now, he was kicked from CLG, he's joined TSM, and first thing he did, in almost Bjergsen-esque fashion, is start streaming and get crazy numbers. Everyone was jumping on. And part of the reason they were jumping on board, not just to watch what a fantastic player he is, but they wanted to see what he would say. And he certainly delivered in that sense. He went fucking ham, talked mad shit about loads of his ex-teammates, his team stuff, portrayed things in a very extreme manner. And so now we end up in a situation where we have to talk about him joining the team and the multiple aspects of that. And just as a little preview, I've done a reflections interview with Hotshot GG, the owner of Cloud9, the owner of CLG, and spoiler, no, the owner of CLG, and that'll come out next week. And it's an interview on Hotshot's career, so a lot of it's about Hotshot and then CLG, but obviously Doublelift's a key part of that from season 2 and the LCS era onwards, and so he gets his fair share. And then towards the end, we have a whole section which is just dedicated to explaining what happened with Doublelift, some of the issues there. It's not like a big drama bomb. It's not purposely trying to make things crazy and say mad shit about Doublelift, but there's some very interesting things into the relationship between Hotshot and Doublelift and CLG, and some of these other issues there. But I'll let everyone see that all fresh when it comes out next week, and so I think it'll be interesting for a lot of people to see because it's dealt with in quite a professional manner, but still with some interesting insights into the behind the scenes stuff and some things that are shocking as well. Ooh, little BuzzFeed tease there. Ooh, Thorin on that tabloid hype. So, clickbait Rooney. So, first and foremost, this move is a big deal because CLG had just won NA. The first time they'd ever won LCS, the first time they'd ever even made the final. Doublelift had just won his first LAN in his entire career. He'd never won a LAN before. He'd finished second in some NA LANs, top 4 in some international LANs, but he never won a LAN. TSM had no roster announced. It was just Bjergsen and God knows who at the time. And he'd been so, as a player, Doublelift just was CLG. He was the brand, carrying it for those last few years. You associated his name with CLG as the first thing you thought of in CLG. Whereas TSM, as the deadly rival, and to some degree always bullying CLG in terms of the results until that last split, you could never imagine him going from that team to this team. It very rarely happens even in sports that a player really goes from the deadly rival to the other one, mainly because in traditional sports, the fans will be so abusive and will hate you so much. In fact, a great example of this is the legendary Portuguese midfielder, attacking midfielder, Figo, who's one of the best players ever, was World Player of the Year one year, left Barcelona at the time, I guess it's debatable, one of the best teams in the whole world, and certainly one of the best teams within Spain, and he joined their deadly rival Real Madrid, also one of the best teams in Spain and in the world. He'd won the European Cup a couple of times, and because he left, even though the people in Barcelona had worshipped him and they loved him, when he went to Real Madrid, they had all these sorts of problems where fans were just giving mega abuse, and when Real Madrid would play Barcelona, there was all these problems. Like I remember there was a story where he had to stop taking corners in football, because when he would go to take the corner and he would have his back to the crowd, people would be throwing coins and lighters and going, "Oh, fuck you." And they had to, even though he's an incredible player, just stop taking corners. So you can see how the vitriol of the fans, where once they love you, but then they feel betrayed, or you go to the other one that ideologically they hate, and that's how their identity is set up, built into the team, and this structure of it's us versus them. You can see why people get so emotional about it. So I think that's part of why this is a big deal, not just the move itself. And I can understand it. I mean, it does make sense to a degree, because part of the reason I thought that CLG winning the NALCS was such a big deal was clearly because of Doublelift. If they'd have had a different player, let's say Doublelift had retired at that split and they'd gotten All-Tech, or let's say they'd even got some European like Freeze or something, and they'd won NA in exactly the same fashion, with the AD carry being a key player and being the star role and doing a lot of this stuff, it wouldn't have meant as much. Because part of it was like, yes, CLG had never been on top in the LCS era, and they had to battle through and always be beaten by Liquid and by TSM and abused in this sense. But more than that, it's that Doublelift had never fully come through. Even when he'd been one of the best players in the world, even when he'd been a very skilled player, even when he'd had good runs of form and be the best at his position in NA, he just never managed to win a LAN. He never win a big tournament. So it was him in CLG winning that was the big story for me. Those factors all together, if it had been a movie, is what made the satisfying climax to the storyline and how the narrative played out. There's also the factor that I'm just kind of shocked because if he was going to go to TSM, it feels like going now is kind of like almost too late. Like it's towards the end of your career in theory. Who knows how many more years, how many more splits you'll play. Who knows even now if TSM's new lineup will be good enough to win NA or have an international impact. Whereas if he'd gone in season 2, when supposedly there were potentially offers out there before the LCS era and long contracts, well, back then, put him on TSM where they had Chaos, who was a good but kind of like a workman AD carry, admittedly with a good knowledge of matchups and pick ban. Suddenly with X Special you have a beast bot lane. Maybe you'd be a contender for Worlds at that point in time. Probably not, because the overall metagame strategy of the team wasn't so great. They were just trying to team fight a lot, but they would have been a very strong team. Likewise, season 3, this is an era where you'd think if they were going to get rid of Wild Turtle or someone would get Doublelift, these are the times it would have made more sense to be in TSM and for both parties. So it's kind of weird that now they've done it, but okay, whatever. So to talk about Doublelift, before we talk about him as a player or any of the implications of being in TSM, I feel like we have to address his personality, because his personality is always out there front and center. It's what made him famous beyond just his very good skills. And so let's start there. So first and foremost, one of the interesting things about Doublelift is his talking, and his talking manifests in cockiness. And it's not as prevalent now, but it's still always down to the surface. But this was extremely prevalent back in Season 2 when he was starting to get really good and he switched to AD carry and joined CLG, because he was talking mad shit on even other good teams, SK Gaming, all sorts of teams. He would talk trash about some of the Koreans, etc. And the implication was like, I'm the best, my team is the best or can be the best, or some of these other teams only look good or they're not good because of this reason, or this player's succeeding but he's not actually that good a player. I mean, in many ways, it's funny that people go so mad about so many inside stuff when we sometimes jokingly do that, because he was doing this but he wasn't even saying it was a joke. He was just delivering as if it was real, and there was never any kind of disclaimer that this is like a heel turn or something. It was just put out a real opinion, and I think he did believe some of it. He was just being a bit blunt with how he expressed it. So one of the interesting things is, I think part of this ego didn't just come from who he is as a person, which he did to a degree, but it was amplified by his association with Chowster, who was the support player when he joined the team. Because the thing was, Chowster previously had played other roles in CLG, and so he was the AD carry. Admittedly, he wasn't an AD carry meta to the same degree beforehand. So when he became support, he really was one of the smartest players in the whole game, especially at laning. And at the time, Season 2, the game was massively about laning. It was less, there wasn't like pick comps and these sorts of things to the same degree. The metagame wasn't as understood in the mid game and late game. So it was a lot about laning to get massive advantages, to go into the team fights and then to win from team fights with the advantages of items, levels, and so on. So if you were really good at laning, you could be one of the best in the world. So Doublelift came along with incredible mechanical skill. Chowster really was like the brain of him, just telling him don't do this, do that, leading the lane at all points in times so that they'd win with their matchups, they'd win in terms of what to do in the lane, they'd create favourable situations, create plays, they'd use Doublelift's skill and they'd smash lane and they'd do very, very well. And that's why they had a chance to be one of the best teams in the world. At one point in time, early in Season 2, they were one of the best teams in the world. So what's interesting is, though, I think the influence that came from Chowster was this notion that the way Chowster would deal with him was like, it wasn't so much a discussion as much like, I'm right. Like, I know more about the game than you. I know what to do in this situation. Follow what I do and it will work. And if Doublelift did so, it would work and it would be the right thing and everything would go great. But it built in him up this nature that if you were the player who knew best or you knew better than someone, you could almost just shut them down and be like, listen, we don't have time for a discussion on this. You know that I'm right. I know more than you. I'm better than you. And this is the way it has to be. And I feel like that to a degree, Doublelift already was cocky, but I feel like that shaped him to a degree because it put in place his mind that if you were the best player, you were that way, then you could behave this way. Whereas like maybe you can to a degree, and maybe for the superstar you have leeway with that. I think you certainly do from what I've known about the history of esports. Most stars have that in them to a degree, but you have to attenuate it to a degree. And you have to learn about how to trust teammates. You have to learn how to not sometimes shit on a lesser player and to let him have his input, and even better, sometimes to have a weak player but who's very sound strategically or something and let him tell you what to do sometimes. Either you're more skilled than him, and that's always been a problem, a tension in Doublelift's mind and in his teams. So this manifests, unfortunately, in kind of a harshness, a rudeness towards how he's dealt with teammates that you've seen time and time again. There's a reason why in interviews you've seen this. There's a reason why you've seen it in terms of people leaving the team and making this known. So this isn't something that was mentioned very often publicly, but I personally had noticed early on in his career, Doublelift often would make borderline rude comments about Hotshot, which weren't necessarily inaccurate. They were just kind of rude in as much as they were necessary, and the effect they'd have on Hotshot was clearly not going to be good, which is when Doublelift was in the team, Hotshot GG early on was still a good player. They had Saint Vicious, who synergized very well with him, but when Saint was kicked, I think it was around like May or something of that year, that was when they got in Voyboy to be the top laner, and Hotshot changed to jungle. And as a jungler, he was a brand new jungler. He was only spamming a couple of champions, Cho'Gath, Nautilus. Didn't go very well. And then after that, when he went back to top lane, when they kicked Voyboy, he actually kind of never went back to being this guy with a wide champion pool, good on certain champs. It felt like he was stuck in that role of just being the tank in the team, and his job's to play certain champions and just play a very limited style. And part of it was Chowster, when they sort of lost a bit of faith in him, Hotshot, obviously the owner, so you can't kick him, they kind of decided, right, let's just find something this guy can do. He can play tanks, he can just get in, he can just zone people for us and we'll win the fight. Okay, you just do that, Hotshot, that's your job. But it's almost like they were so rude to him, they limited him. Like, that is all you can do, that's all you're going to do, and you're just going to do that. And so, following the lead of Chowster, Doublelift was part of this. And so as a result, Hotshot, you can see how that would erode his confidence to a degree. Hotshot himself hasn't never really spoken out on this topic, though. It's something I ask him about in the interview, so you have to find out what he says there. Ooh, I'm so good at this, aren't I? Fuck me, I'm good. Pay that, Skrilla. So then another player who actually actively did talk about this topic is Link, in his famous 17-page Chronicles of Link, the Dunzo Disciple. I don't know. I should have probably thought of a better one for that. In his 17-page thing, he repeatedly brings up Doublelift as a key driving force of problems and friction within the team, and mentions that Doublelift loses faith in certain teammates, and when he loses faith in a teammate, it's like there's no way back from that, and he'll be an overbearing presence, or he won't want to do certain things, and so he'll seem like he's in control of the team, even though he might not be trying to control the team, but just by being stubborn or having his mind set in a certain way, or maybe even on a low level sabotaging things where he'll say, okay, we'll try that, but it's not going to work, or it didn't work well, I told you so, that kind of an attitude. Unfortunately, that would have a disruptive aspect on the whole team, and players who needed support and who didn't have such strong mentalities, admittedly Double's always had quite a strong mentality, they would be shook by this, they'd be broken, it would erode their confidence, it would be corrosive effect on the team. And I mean, I made the funny joke, well, I get to say it's funny, it's my show, fuck you, it's funny. The funny joke when I did my famous Link's Tiny Violin video, which got me 6 Skrilla, which was that if you read that piece, you would have thought Doublelift wasn't some reasonably young, just cocky Asian kid from California who just played video games. You'd literally think he was Godzilla. Because every story would be like, you know, everything was going so well, this was going well, we trusted each other, we had a strategy, and then suddenly, oh God, the Doublelift attacked. And when he came in, it just, you know, the force, and no one could stand against him, and he tore us all apart, we wrecked us all, and, you know, the city was just a flaming mess afterwards with broken buildings and massive crater marks everywhere. We never quite recovered from that, the impact. And then he went away for a while, and then things were good again, and we began to rebuild. And, you know, the team got together, and we built this new community. Oh my God, and then came back the Doublelift, and he killed and he ate the women and the children and smashed the orphanage. Like, Jesus Christ, like, he's just a young kid. But the problem is, just in terms of the personalities they had within the team at that point in time, in the LCS era, they didn't have the strong enough personalities to stand against him. When you had like a Saint Vicious, when you had Chowster, these guys don't give a fuck what Doublelift says. If he says something and they don't agree with it, they have more tenure. At one point in time, at least before, they were better players, and they have more of a say within the team and shot calling say. So they can make, shut the fuck up, Doublelift, and do whatever they want. So at the time, Doublelift's following their route. Now, admittedly, they might have also rubbed off on him with how you can behave that way to a degree. I can understand that. There's also Dexter. I mean, I don't know how much he's said publicly, but I think it's pretty clear if you read between the lines, and from knowing him, that it was a problem for him with Doublelift when he was in the team, that he didn't like the way things went in terms of when he himself had issues and when the team was having issues. This would be one of the negative factors within making things go worse, would be Doublelift's attitude and the way he'd behave towards teammates. Now, the problem with Doublelift is it feels like he has that very set mentality where he just expects you to do your job really well, and that's it. There's no discussion to be had. So he's going to do his job, which he thinks of as play AD carry, smash lane, and be the best player in the team and have the team focused on him. That's what he's going to do. That's what he thinks of as his job role. He's going to do that. And then if you can't do your job, whatever it is relative to that in the team, so for example, be the jungler and gank for him, or be a mid laner and not lose lane, or be the top laner and have some impact on the game. If you can't do these things, rather than just be like, oh, there's problems here, is there some way I could help you, is there some way I can support you on this, or maybe I can do something myself to make it easier for you, or let's work together on this aspect. At some point in time, he gets to the end of his rope and he just kind of figures like, listen, do your fucking job. Like, I'm doing my job, you do your job. If you can't do that, then that's the end of the matter, And yeah, it's not that he goes there immediately. That's what I think he'd learned over time. It's that he would be able to build up some faith and some trust in people at the beginning of splits and when he started new with a player and think, right, I've got to give this guy some confidence. And early on, maybe it'd be working and things were going well, but there would always hit that point when he was just done with the guy. It was just like, I'm done, right, fuck this. And unfortunately, it feels like when things went to shit, Doublelifts mode really was to just like lock it off, lock it down. And it's almost like a post-apocalyptic world. Like, just keep hold of the shit that's mine. You get the fuck away from me. Do whatever you got to do over there. Don't come near me. I'm doing my shit. And then just each man for himself, which is obviously a terrible team attitude when you're down, which is when you need the support network the most to build yourselves back up and find a way to work as a team to get overcome problems. In general, I've got to say, my read is, it seems like someone who has some kind of an issue with empathy. And what I mean by that is, empathy is the ability to think as if you were that person and to be able to feel the emotions they're feeling and therefore understand to some degree and perceive where they might be as a person, the problems they're having. And so I've always felt like in that sense, that's why he had these issues knowing like, well, how would I motivate a team? Like, why would I need to motivate a teamwork? And is motivating just to tell the guy, you're good? Am I supposed to just play and not say something when he makes a mistake? You always seem very confused about that. And here's the thing. I don't think it's that he's just a total asshole and he didn't care about that. I think he just didn't have, he just lacks something in that. It's not that he lacks total emotion. He's a sociopath or a serial killer or something. Obviously, I think that would be an extreme way to draw this conclusion. Again, he's just a fucking kid playing video games. But I think put it this way, if this was an RPG and he rolled up the Doublelift character, you'd be putting all these points in mechanics and trash talk and charisma, well, to a degree. But you'd only have so many points to put elsewhere, wouldn't you? So in empathy or like emotional sensitivity and awareness, you wouldn't have many points. You'd only have a couple there, if you can understand the metaphor. So I do think as well, from observing him, from interviewing him, from talking to him, I get the sense as well that he knows that there's something wrong with not being able to empathize in that sense, or that it's not the right way in terms of how the best teams are. They seem to have a good balance of that, and stars understanding the support players and vice versa. And maybe he's watched sports documentaries and movies and stuff and seen that, okay, you need to have these things, you need to somehow have confidence in each other and stuff. But unfortunately, it feels like, even though he worked on it a bit and he could do it for a bit at a time, it felt like some of it was he just learned the right things to say publicly. Like he would say the right things to the guy, but not necessarily actually have that be what was going on inside himself. Or say the right things on an interview. No, I trust this guy. Now that guy isn't a failure or a joker. I believe in him. You got to believe in your teammates. Still going to finish top X. But it wasn't really congruent with what was clearly his philosophy in all other areas of the game and life, and even the way he would play the game and his actions in the game, and then what had happened with the teammates. It didn't fit. He'd learned how to say the right things, but he wasn't behaving in that particular way. And I do think he wanted to be a good teammate, or whatever his notion of a good teammate was. And he had good intentions, but he didn't know how to implement that. He didn't have a strategy to do so, or he had strategies that only worked very initially, and then he didn't have backups or plan B. And he always reached the point where he was done. He was donezo. Now, let's be real. If we're going to look into this, some of this has to be because he's a fucked up person. And when I say that, understand the caveat that pretty much all of us are fucked up people in some way. Remember, we are talking primates that somehow have using the fucking techne of the world, have figured out all these devices to have a totally artificial world that's nothing like what our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, wrecked creationists, were living, and that sort of a lifestyle, or how any other animals pretty much live in nature. And as a result, we live such an artificial, modern, unique life that we're not really equipped with the tools to deal with it in many senses, and we've had to build up different techniques and different approaches to even surviving and being able to find some sort of satisfaction or happiness or overcome. And we obviously don't do it always. That's where you see massive suicide rates, and you see wars, and you see all these problems in society of people becoming homeless and drug addicts, and all these things come from the fact that something's fucked up within humans. But what's interesting is we all tend to be fucked up in slightly unique ways because of the imprints that we took during the key points in our lives when we were a kid, and the first sexual experiences, and then our school environment, and then our work environment, and then what happens with our family as we grow older, older. All these aspects imprint on us different patterns of different reality channels of how life is and how to think about life and the way that life's going to be and our expectations and how we think we deal with things and what's good and what's bad, and all these relative terms and notions all get set at different key points in time. So as a result, we all have our own little foibles, little idiosyncrasies, and Doublelift certainly has them. So think of who he is as a person that we know as the public, the exoteric, the explicit story of Doublelift. Well, we know it starts out with his family situation where he's, first of all, he's part of an immigrant family, so they're coming from a totally drastic culture and world to a totally different one that has totally different rules, and then maybe they haven't adapted entirely, or they don't want to in certain ways. They want to maintain certain old culture values. So he's a young kid growing up in it as part of a culture, but then his family's a slightly different culture, and there's going to be the friction point between those two. And obviously that in some ways led to the blow up where he left his house and he was no longer with his family and hadn't seen them for many years, and he became a pro gamer. And now he's joined pro gaming, and okay, everyone wants the cool story to be that he just made his pro gaming team his family. To a degree, but the problem is, remember, he was having contentious relationship with his family. Well, he's had a contentious relationship with his pro gaming teammates for all his career. He always has done that thing where it always feels like not only does he get done with people, but then if he loses trust of them and then he things go badly, it feels like, even though clearly at points in time he has been friends with these guys and he's liked these guys and he has wanted it to work with them, after the fact, if they ever say anything vaguely negative, or crucially, I think with the Afromu case, this is a good example, if he thinks they might say something negative, his approach is kind of to try and like reject them first and be like, oh, well, they weren't friends with me anyway, like, oh, things were always bad with them, and who gives a fuck? And so sometimes he goes too far the other way and says things that maybe he doesn't even mean that much. And so this is an interesting topic in this sense. I mean, the reason why I'd said before I think he learned to say the right things is because he wasn't a very good actor even when he did it. Like, you could even tell if you asked him follow-up questions, it just unraveled. I mean, he's not a fucking amazing method actor. He's not able to pretend this way, that he's not, oh, I was only pretending to be a trash-talking guy. Yeah, all right, mate, sure you are. So, obviously he has his issues. He's someone also who, because he's joined the initial CLG, the one with all these massive egos, and they don't play as a team, and there's no cohesion, but they're just fantastic players, and it's a very individualistic game at the time, so they have some success. That's setting an imprint on him on how a team can operate and how you can operate within one of those teams, and how much you have to listen to someone, or you can argue with them or do whatever the fuck you want. Then he's playing with bad teams in the first few seasons of LCS, few splits. So now he's having to be the best player but on a bad team. So what happens then? Do you just let people, to give a basketball analogy, do you throw the ball as the star player to a shit player who's going to miss and fuck up the whole game? But if you don't ever throw it to him, he'll lose all his confidence, it'll be even worse. Or do you take the shot yourself? No, you can make it with a higher percentage, but it's going to be harder because the whole team's focusing on you. He had these dilemmas going on in some sense. Then, because he's made so many boasts and been so cocky about so many enemy AD carries, so many champions, then he's trying to rationalize at all times how to fit that with his play, like knowing, oh, if I lose to this person, I've just talked mad shit on them, I've said that champion's trash, I'm never going to play Draven or whatever, he gets bodied by Draven. All these issues. There's a lot of complicated moving parts in his personality in terms of his career. Interestingly, as a personality, he has never really been a choker, actually. Like, he's someone where he's made a lot of misplays, it might seem that way, but actually I think if you look at the general trend of his career, he hasn't really been someone who did choke. He never really had bad performances. At best, he just had okay performances in playoffs. I mean, he had playoffs where he was quite clutch, but the team wasn't that good, so they couldn't do much beyond what he was trying to do. I think if you look at the IEM Cologne final, they lost to Gambit most recently, the IEM 9 Cologne final, he was wicked in this final. He did everything he could, but his team just completely shit the bed and got wrecked at a bunch of positions. So he did everything he could. He was playing well. It is worth pointing out that there is some degree of loyalty clearly going on here. I mean, he did stick with CLG a long time, and at least publicly was in support of old players and teammates that he had at the time, when clearly there must have been, I mean, I know there were opportunities to go to other big teams, to go overseas, to go elsewhere, and he never took them for whatever reasons. Reasons we can get into, some of the reasons maybe we touch on in my interview. Fuck me, I'm good. Now, as a player, to talk about his skills, first and foremost, for people who weren't around, because the majority of people watching this video right now didn't watch Doublelift in Season 2, didn't see him in Season 3, might have only seen a bit of him in Season 4. So in Season 2, first of all, let's go back. Go to Season 1, where Doublelift was playing as support at times, and he was playing AD carry briefly. He was an okay player. He started to show some mechanical prowess, but he was always make these crazy misplays that would fuck up the whole game, be so stupid that people would be like, what a moron. And so as a result, lots of pros around that time were always telling me, like, I never thought he'd be good at all. Like, I never thought he'd ever be in a top team. So he comes into CLG in Season 2, he gets to play with Chauster, who's kind of moulding him and teaching him how to play the game, and now they harness his mechanical talent. to become absolutely one of the best mechanical players in the world. Absolutely amazing AD carry, really dominant player who's getting pentakills and wrecking everyone all over the place. And he was a godlike player in Season 2. Let's be real. For anyone who wasn't following the game, even when Koreans started to get involved and Chinese players were involved and they had all the sick AD carries, Doublelift was a god in Season 2. This isn't something like, you're just nostalgic and you think he was because he's playing these tournaments. No, I saw him play in Korea. Saw him play against top level teams. I saw him play international tournaments. Saw him play all this. And I saw those other players, Wei Zhao, Prey, etc. Yes, Wei Zhao was probably better over the whole year, but Doublelift was right up there. He was one of the best individual players in the entire world. And it's not really even debatable if you really talk to the experts. Then in Season 3, he was still good, but first and foremost, he's immediately limited by the fact he's not playing the game. I mean, literally, this is the guy who's spamming Diablo 3, who's playing like fucking StarCraft 2 and Street Fighter and stuff. And if you even talk to him, like in my first Grilled interview in late 2012, he even says he actually thinks, as a philosophy, that playing solo queue for him is a waste of time and only makes him worse because he's playing bad players, which obviously is fairly... what would you even say? I mean, I'd say idiotic, but I guess idiotic's a bit harsh. Fairly simple-minded, a bit naive in terms of it, because obviously, I mean, boxers don't just only practice against other world-class boxers, do they? You don't train that way. So I think that was a very silly approach, and as a result, it cost him a bit. His skill level went down a bit. He wasn't as fresh. He didn't adapt to the new champions to some degree. I mean, famously, Draven's a good example of one where he's like, I won't play it, it's dog shit. So it's almost like in spite of when it became good, he wouldn't play it still. And obviously, if you're a great player, you adapt to whatever the fuck's out there, don't you? He had Chauster for the summer, but in the spring he had Aframu, and Aframu was totally fresh, and it didn't go that well, so he didn't have Chauster anymore. He didn't have this guy who was this amazing support to guide him at all times. Before that, he'd had Loco Doco, who's dog shit, could only play one fucking champion, Nunu. So as a result, he's really become almost forced into becoming quite a selfish player, not being able to trust that guy, and thinking, I have to tell the support what to do now, and I have to lead the lane, and I have to lead the whole fucking game, because Hotshot's falling off, and Big Fat LP's gone to shit, and we've got Link, he's a new guy, and, you know, all these problems all over the place. So in Season 3, it was a much, much worse time for him. He also just really locked down in terms of mentality and was only spamming hyper carries and would just never play anything else. Like, he never play anything that would work for the team concept, because, I mean, how can he trust these guys' carries? It was hyper carries all day long, like Vayne into matchups that didn't even necessarily work, just all day long hyper carries. And as a result, the enemy team knew at all times, well, we know who to shut down here, we know who we have to fuck with here, we know who we have to gank here, and the whole game was like, let's fuck Doublelift's world up after making Hotshot feed, etc., etc. So you go into Season 4. I mean, he's already had a split now on Demonte, and he's Aframu's back at this point in time, and now they get Dexter as the jungler. Now it starts to get pretty decent. They have that good spring split where they finished third. They were one game from the finals. Aframu's getting pretty good as a support player. The bot lane's now getting really strong within NA. It's going well. Summer season, they're top of the league at one point in time, then everything goes to shit, they go to Korea, it all gets fucked up. He's still a good player during all this point in time. He's gotten better than he was in Season 3. He's now back to being a strong player. Admittedly, he's still stuck in the Season 2 mentality sometimes of like, I have to smash lane, I have to 2v2 fight all the time. But he's still doing it to a degree. He's still very good at it. He's still a very good laner, still a strong player in team fights. Season 5, the team gets a lot better. They bring in better coaching towards the summer split. As a result, he looks very good. Admittedly, AD carries don't carry to the same degree they did before, but he's clearly the star player of the team. They win the league. They win in Madison Square Gardens. So you talk about him in terms of his strengths. Fantastic mechanical skill. Even to this day, incredible mechanical skill. Even for all the players in the world. I mean, other players are better players, so they look more polished and they're able to use their skill more effectively. But he's still one of a very high level of mechanical skill. You can see this, as you always have been able to, with his orb walking or his kiting. I mean, famously on champions like Vayne, just utterly phenomenal in terms of how he can kite and get massive amounts of attack damage done while dodging, staying within attack distance, but getting out of the attack distance of other people. Very, very skilled player in this sense. I mean, a great example also, he's one of the first players to really master input buffering, like famously on Vayne to condemn Alistair when it would charge in onto the wall. Very, very good at that and knowing how to use that. Famously poor, and rightfully so, at decision making. Chowster literally did need to sort of lead him by the hand for most of season 2. Then Chowster would even say about his mechanical skill, he would say, yeah, he's got amazing mechanical skill, but you know what? He puts himself in situations where he needs his mechanical skill to get out of it or have a chance to get out when he doesn't need to put himself in that situation in the first place. Like if he was smarter about certain aspects of positioning, like a player like Genja was, for example, he would never need that mechanical skill to make the outplay to get out of that situation, so he would dominate the game more. This is where someone like a Wei Zhao was significantly better. Wei Zhao was a phenomenal player in terms of positioning and how to do all that, and had the mechanical cap of a Doublelift. Now, Prey didn't have the mechanical cap of Doublelift, but he had good positioning and he had a good team around him and knew how to play within the team. So you can see how these other guys all, even if sometimes some of them lacked something that Doublelift had, their overall game was better and more polished and better for the team concept. It's not a 1v1 game. You think about, he was and is one of the best laners ever, a very sick laner, great knowledge of matchups. That's the way he still thinks about the world. He still thinks about the bot lane as his office, and this is the whole world of the game and how the first 20 minutes goes. Obviously, games don't always take 20 minutes just in terms of laning. Is how he thinks of how the game is, and that's how a lot of his worldview still made. The problem is, from about season 3 onwards, the game became more than just laning. It became mainly at that point about doing decently well in laning, but then having the champions and the comps to start doing shit in the mid game, such as pick comps, or later on, obviously, to transition mid-game objectives into having a big advantage, so that if you ever had to team fight, you had a big advantage on map pressure or better items or better positioning already. Now, his problem is he's always been a sick laner the early part of the game. He's always been really strong in team fights, but the middle part of the game is what's always fucked him. And so transitioning between those two is what you see the issue in the LCS era. Because if he can get to the team fights, he's a very strong player, great at outputting damages. Admittedly, he would always make those occasional weird misplays and over-aggressive moves where he'd end up getting killed or bait all the CC onto himself, but not in a way like, oh, I'm going to dodge it all, like bait it all and actually get it all on himself and get fucking mega wrecked. I mean, there was that famous line where, was it Crepo or Froggen said that? I think it was Froggen said that Doublelift's like, it's almost like he is like a homing missile for CC, like he just runs into it and gets wrecked by it. I mean, famously, an example of his over-aggression is he was one of those guys, if he played Tristana, would rocket jump in to initiate in a fight, get wrecked, lose the fight, and then the team would lose the whole game. It's like, brilliant, mate. Yeah, well done. Pretty sure it's not how you meant to use that champion. You're an amazing player. Use it as a get out, if anything, to kite. So, now that we've talked about him as a player, his personality, his history, we have to talk about him on TSM. So first and foremost, the only other player we know on TSM right now is Bjergsen. Phenomenal player, someone himself who's been a hard carry for a long time, someone who's had his issues with not having the best players around at all times, but someone who's been a lot more successful. Now, first and foremost, on paper, this looks great. If you have a beast AD carry, a beast mid laner, you've already got the makings of a really sick team there with great hard carries. And they're both used to being hard carries on their own. Now they can be together. You hope that they're going to do that thing, almost like an 80s action movie where the two rivals come together to like beat the Russians or something. It's like, let's do this for America or something. You'd hope that what they're going to do is get together and think, right, listen, we always had problems in our career where we couldn't trust certain players or so much was on us. We know we got each other now. So if we're cool, if we have our relationship right and we both are willing to sometimes give up champions or the carry role in certain spots and certain times in the game to know the other guy can carry and trust him, now we've got a really strong team. Now we can potentially carry. Now we've got a permanent 2-threat team. That could be really good. It could also obviously go the other way. There could also obviously be a clash of egos at times and conflicts, and someone like a Doublelift might think that it's not working the right way in terms of this comp, but more importantly, someone like a Bjergsen could be like, well, I'd be more successful than you as my team. I could see some issues there, but obviously until that happens, that's just speculation at this point in time. Now, more interesting to me is the Reggie issue, because Doublelift, throughout his career, when he's been this player where from season 3 onwards has been this massive corrosive force at times, this overbearing force, he was CLG in many ways in terms of the brand and the teams and the players and how his ego would work. If he's going to be anything like that, which has been his nature to this point in time, there's going to be clashes with Reggie. I mean, I hope there's a fucking reality TV show about this next split. Oh, baby. Because he's someone where even if he says, I agree with what you say and I'm going to do it that way, you can see he's the sort of person who can't always just, he can't be broken down to the same degree that some of these other guys can. And so far, since he got out of the Chowster and he became very good and Chowster fell off, there's almost never been anyone who could match him. Monty couldn't handle him. Who else? Let's think. Afro couldn't stop him, or obviously couldn't stop him. Link couldn't stop him. So what's going to happen when he faces Reggie, the guy who's perceived to be the biggest asshole ever in League of Legends? I mean, I'd give him that medal. And a guy where he's famous in just being very harsh on people, or just telling people straight out he doesn't like the way they do things, or even threatening to cut people if he doesn't like the way they're playing and the way they're working in the team. Well, how's this going to work in this sense? I mean, they've never had a super beast AD carry in TSM. They had one briefly when Wildtilt was pretty good in Season 3. But even then, he was the new player. He was controlled by X Special. He was still within a team concept where Reginald was playing. It's never quite been the same as having like a Doublelift on your team. So will Reggie and TSM adapt to that and know it's a new era? Will they be very harsh with him and treat him in a very strict way? In which case, I could see Doublelift kind of spazzing on that and not liking the way it is. If he gets broken down, that may be even fucking with his confidence. Ooh, imagine the taste. This medicine is all bitter. Yeah, that's what you've been making everyone else drink for 10 years, you motherfucker. Obviously not 10 years. It's hyperbole, baby. So, will they have success? That's the real question, right? Now, obviously, I don't even know who the fuck else is on this team. Or do I? Well, I don't officially know. And actually, they're not signed anyway. So, yes, I guess I don't know. Just hypothesizing, with the players they've already got, they've got a great base. They have a really good chance to be a top 2, top 3 team in an ALCS. Obviously, there's also a big potential for personality issues and ego issues to fucking ruin the team completely. But I look on paper and I say this should be able to work. They should be capable of winning an LCS, or at least being a top 4 team at the minimum. That should be the minimum expectation, to be a team that can make the final of an ALCS and then contend for the title. Now, in terms of will the team work, I think it's going to be very difficult initially to make the Bjergsen Doublelift thing work unless they just happen to have some mad initial synergy. Unless it really is like these 2 star players to somehow, wow, I can trust this guy and just click instantly, which is going to be very rare and very unique chemistry, but it occasionally happens. Now, if that doesn't happen, yeah, I could see some problems. So, personally, thinking of who they might get, I think they need some more supportive players at this point in time. In terms of the support, I hope it's not someone who's just going to be totally run over by Doublelift, or that's going to be a bad state of affairs. I hope the top laner is like a solid top laner, just a consistent guy, and I would hope the jungle is someone who's going to gank for bot lane and not be a Thorin who disappears off the map, because that's going to tilt the fuck out of Doublelift. That's going to cause huge problems in TSM. So hopefully this is the sort of team we go for, and who knows, maybe they could be one of the best MA teams ever, but there's still a lot of questions to be answered there. Now, thanks to Alpha Draft for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to play fantasy esports, where last split you could have put Doublelift with Bjergsen on teams, and now they're actually both going to be on the same team. So if they do really well, they both famously were extremely good in terms of getting points this last year in Alpha Draft tournaments, so I'm sure they would be good pickups for future tournaments. At the moment, obviously, the League of Legends, we don't have LCS, but there'll be IEM San Jose coming up. There will be LCS next year. You can not only play League of Legends, you can play CSGO, Dota 2, Smite, you can play all sorts of games there. It's quite an interesting, fun service. Play all sorts of different pay scales you want, depending on how much you want to pay, how much you want to win. Even have free tournaments there, so check it out in the description box below. Thanks for the cash.